Morning. Happy Father's Day. I'm going to need that in a minute. And I'll probably need that too. Sheila put something in my eyes too, maybe today, I don't know. Thanks. So again, happy Father's Day. How's that, Jeannie? Is that loud enough? Close enough? Loud enough there? Better? Hopefully. Either way, this is what I'd usually call a Hallmark holiday. It's kind of I feel like it's a contrived day. Celebrate dads with cards and gifts, whatever each of us does really to mark the day, one day a year. It's very good for the economy. That's what I hear. Some of you invest in it, some don't. Quick question, why are Mother's Day and Father's Day one day a year? I think we're supposed to. We're instructed to honor your mother and your father, and that's number 5 of 10 things we're instructed. So it just seems like one day is a little lacking. Either way, as parents, we try to honor our children each and every day. I, for one, do. I'm sure most of the parents in here know that moments we feel honored don't need to be restricted to one day a year. We get macaroni necklaces, finger paintings. The first day your child shows compassion for another living thing. Watching your kids fall in love. There's many ways that your children honor you each and every day. They'll give us a warm feeling, and just feel their blessing on our lives is probably enough for most of us. Charles Dickens, and I know I'm going to quote something other than the Bible here, but Charles Dickens said, "It is no small thing when those so fresh from heaven love us." Isn't that the truth? Psalms 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." What's our Father saying here? He's saying in the midst of storm, disaster, war, upheaval, unrest, be still. Most of us recognize that verse, but don't really look at what it pertains to, what's preceding it, what's going on. In this, we behold Zion. Amidst a time of trouble and war, Zion refers to the hill in Jerusalem, or Jerusalem in general for those who are newer here. It can mean a few different things, the Temple Mount, city itself. Sometimes it's used in a way to mean just a holy place or a kingdom of heaven. It can be all those things. Either way, so imagine a war going against that, against the very fabric that is God. So to read the rest of Psalms 46 here, there's a little bit more to it. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and mountains quake with their surging. That's some powerful imagery right there. I find that powerful imagery. Read on, 46:6. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, and the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. That's a command from God. Be still. Doesn't mean what it's often used to represent. It speaks to both Christians and the enemy. Commands the enemy to stop and acknowledge God's power. Reminds Christians to stop fearing and acknowledge who your God is. What are his limitations? Be still. What storms do you have or are you experiencing? Because we all are. We often don't recognize that others are as well. The person next to you may be experiencing the worst imaginable trauma of their life. So I urge you all to be gentle, love one another, pray for those around you. Do be still and know that God is with them in their troubles. My mother often said to me, and still says, I've said it as well, God will never give you more troubles than you can bear. I've come to understand that, and I've kind of added to it that God will be with you through the troubles as they come, and they will come, and God will endure alongside of you, making bearing those times possible. As we know, nothing is possible without the Lord. He won't give you your share of trauma and leave you to it. Now, I'm going to give two warnings at this point. First one I'm going to call the tear warning. The tear warning is one years ago when I was a very angry young man. Part of getting through that was working through how I'm going to deal with that anger. In that, any emotion now, really I just have to let it flow. So there you go. That is what I call a tear warning. The next one is a trigger warning. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to share some stuff today that hopefully does not trigger anyone here, because I know some of the trauma some of you have been through in your lives, and this might affect you as well. So apologies if it does. But I will tell you this. It's difficult for me, and sometimes I might just need to take a moment myself just to be still. Know that if I have any tears, that they are tears of joy when I make it kind of to the end here. So thank you for giving me that moment. Broad statement here, just real quick one. I'm going to hit it with you. I want to share with you the death of my son. June 4, 2005, 17 years ago, just over. Medical miscalculations set in motion a series of events that still rock me until today. A nurse made a mistake, and minutes later, at 4:48, my son came into the world. Any dads in here can relate the chaos of what that means for them, but for me, this time was not like I'd expected. The mistake effectively had overdosed my son on Demerol. It's an opioid drug, slows the heart rate, weakens breathing, and has extreme effects in infants and children. Immediately we knew there was a problem. I could see my son, a limp, gray little body. I do appreciate your patience today. No movement, no sound. The doctor did not pass to the nurses for cleanup, checks, return it to the mother, typical. Instead, he did a quick check of his own and said something. I'm not sure what he said. Everything seemed muffled. My heart pounded in my ears. I've been present for many births on many animals, and even some humans too. And I recognized what was going on. The room began to spin, and everything was blurred. So he said something to one of the nurses who picked up, there's an emergency phone on the wall, picked it up and called an emergency to peds. And the doctor bolted from the room with my son's lifeless body. I looked at my wife with a look which must have been awful for her, because it was the look of terror. I do remember at that moment getting my hearing back for a moment, and I remember her words. I can hear them today. Go. At that moment, I know she had not at that point seen our son, but the look I gave her told her everything. And I did what she said. I ran as fast as I could with the doctor down the hall. He was carrying my son's lifeless body like a football, and working on it while he ran. We both crashed through the doors down the end of the hall into a room where a team was instantly assembled and began to work on the baby. Nothing in maternity books, papers, classes, prepares a new parent to watch a medical team perform CPR on their infant while hooking them up to heart monitors and placing breathing tubes into a tiny little body. Storm. Everything was a blur: lights, action, noise, panic, urgency. Roaring, quaking. I read you those words from Psalms. They took place at that moment. I was experiencing a storm like nothing I could have imagined. Time slowed to a near stop at that moment. I asked Jesus for help. And I pleaded with God to intervene. I began to bargain for my son, just to live. I would do all manner of things. I would serve God in exchange for my son's life. I would be a better person, a better Christian. I would give up anything that could be seen as a vice. I would go door to door and preach his name. I would stand on street corners. I didn't have a limitation to what I would do in bargaining with God that day. Now, I've spoken with many of you, and I know that you've all been in that place where you've bargained with God. You've tried to talk to God. We've all tried to convince the Lord of something that we wanted or needed at one point or another. We all have. I even heard one pastor stand up here one day and say that he's gone so far as like he could draw a diagram and say, "This is how it's supposed to go, God. This is what I want to see." Anything in exchange for my son. Then, in the midst of my worst storm ever, Be still. The voice inside came upon me. Be still. That's not how this works. It was gentle and calming during the most intense panic of my life. God stepped in and reminded me. He told me quite clearly, this is not your child. This is my child. I only ever entrust their care to you for a time on this earth. A series of images of what that meant flashed in front of my eyes. Something very difficult to understand was instantly pressed upon me. What it really looked like to be a father. Ephesians 6:4. Bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. To care for someone more than you could ever care about yourself. Well, I had a daughter already. I had taken some things for granted with being a father. Namely, the shortness and fragility of life. He utters his voice, the earth melts. Right there. With that, I heard it. I won't forget those words because they were the next most powerful compared to the voice of the Lord. I have it. It wasn't said like that. It was more like, I have it. One of the medical team announced a heartbeat. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Time at that moment returned, and it was really seconds for color to come back to that little body. And my son moved. Covered with wires and tubes and tape holding things in place. But he was alive. Now, I don't have any pictures from right away because there was enough stuff on this baby. You couldn't really see a baby. You could not hold a baby for days. But that is him at a few days. Placed him into a plastic case. He stayed there most of the first few days, and he got stronger. Pick that one. That's him now. He's 17 years old a few days ago. Praise Jesus. Yeah. 3 John 1-4, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Let me tell you, we all care for our children. And appreciate them. We try to teach them what's right and wrong. But when you understand that they are God's children, they become so much more. The care required becomes more. Who would not want to honor God by providing the very best for his children? Jeremiah 1:5 states, before I formed you in the womb. Natalie, I could let you say this one. I've heard you say it enough times. You could probably just say Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nation. And in this, we know they're his. Once we as fathers understand the gift of our children and the faith that God has in us, really comes into focus. God sent Jesus, his son, to live with us, to be a child in the care of Mary and Joseph, to experience our life on earth. And yet he knew a time would come for Jesus to be brutally crucified and die. As a father, I cannot imagine that. Knowing and allowing something so terrible to befall one's son. But God's greater than that. God's greater than any other. And he knew what he was doing. He knows what he's doing because Jesus lives. I lost Carrie Ann somewhere, as I was going to ask her up here. I'm not taking a whole lot of your time with the message today. It is going to be a very short one, because if it's one thing I recognize, it's that you probably all have a beautiful day out there. You all have a family, sons, fathers, an uncle, someone special that you'd like to spend today with, so I don't want to keep you here all day. But Jesus lives. I can't really explain my emotions to anyone that day when my son was made alive. But all those who love him rejoiced that day. I didn't tell anyone the full extent of that morning. No one knew the full extent. I made the full extent known to my wife this week. She knew something happened that day. She knew things didn't go as planned. She knew that our son was in an incubator. She did not know the full extent, and she's never known the moment I shared with the Lord that day until this week. I can't tell anyone the full extent of that morning, but the understanding it placed in me makes the sacrifice of Jesus so profound, that I can't help but be filled with praise and love for that. God is an amazing Father. He sacrificed his son for you and I. His son endured pain and death and overcame so that we can live. That is love. And that is what I will celebrate this Father's Day and every day until I get to take my place in his house forever. And that's why we are gathered here today and each Sunday and every day we have on this earth, to love like that. Now, isn't that worth something? Isn't that worth celebrating? That's worth celebrating. Happy Father's Day.